Welcome to Set the Captives Free Ministries with evangelist Willie Needham, providing Christ-centered solutions for the bewildered believer. So whether you're a battle-hardened street preacher in need of some advice, or a timid spirit with a heart for the lost who doesn't know where to start, this podcast is for you. So stay tuned and find out what we can do for you. God bless. Hello everybody once again, and welcome to this week's edition of the Set the Captives Free Ministries podcast. Today's message is titled, What do you mean, you? There's something I've noticed in recent days. People nowadays are all about themselves, except when it comes to personal responsibility and accountability. See, in my evangelism lately, I've discovered that I can talk about sin. I can talk about sin until the cows come home. I can even kind of get people to admit sinning, as long as I use we. As long as people feel like they can use we, and they're not being isolated, they seem more comfortable to admit to certain things. It's very interesting. But I don't recommend using we. I still recommend using you. Because the fact is that you individually have a responsibility to God alone. And as a sinner, that's a hard concept to grasp. So people don't want to be singled out. They don't want to feel like they're the only ones who are going to be standing before God ever. While that's not the case, they don't want to feel like they're going to have to stand before God at all. So, try it sometime. Try using we in reference to sin instead of you, and you'll find out you'll become very popular. You'll be very well liked, and even if you feel like you're really hitting it hard, they'll be like, oh no, you're fine, if you use we. But you'll be very surprised to see how things change as soon as you start using you. That was something I had noticed myself in recent evangelism, because when I get to the point where you have to stand before God, because I always start out with the 10 Commandments, asking people if they've lied, if they've stolen, if they've used God's name in vain, if they've had hatred in their heart, if they've had lust in their heart, so on and so forth. And they usually are pretty cooperative in admitting to these things, because I've been using we. See, what I do is I have a chalkboard tablet with the words your name on it. And so when I introduce myself and I get their name, I say, okay, oh, so your name is Johnny. Okay, well, hi Johnny, my name is Willie. And what I did here is I wrote your name on it, so that way when you see it, you see Johnny, and when I see it, I see Willie, so we are going to look at the 10 Commandments together. And that's usually how I've been presenting it. And for the most part, people are very cooperative in admitting to sin. And so I start going through those questions, and then comes time when you stand before God. Now if I have a group, I'll say like, we'll all stand before God. And usually I'll say, yeah, like we're all going to have to stand before God individually. And as I would say it, I think, okay, something just doesn't seem to work about this. But they seemed okay with it. And I seemed okay with it because everybody else seemed okay with it. And then it hit me. Everybody seemed okay with it because they felt like everybody else was going to be standing next to them at the same time. When in fact, it's just going to be you. Before the throne. Nobody's going to be able to stand in your place here on earth. You're not going to be able to have that Catholic grandmother or that Baptist cousin or that Pentecostal preacher uncle. They're not going to be able to stand in your place. It's just you. And that's what I tell people. And that's when they start, that is the point when they start saying, oh, well, that's your opinion. Oh, I don't really believe all that. Like, do you really think it's like that? They start justifying themselves as soon as they start having to take personal responsibility. You see, I could shower them with personal compliments and be like, oh, tell me something I don't know. But as soon as I start saying, you are going to have to answer for the things that you have done to God, they'll suddenly start saying, whoa, wait a minute. I don't believe that. Why are you judging me? And what that is the mouth of justification. You see, people want to justify themselves. They want to justify their sinful lifestyle. They want to feel better about what they're doing with their lives. They want to have high self-esteem in their hatred of God. So when you put it in their face that they're going to have to answer to God, they don't really like that very much, and, why should they? They're good people, right? But the fact of the matter is that when they start jumping on you like that, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the fact that they are jumping on you with questions and objections, because as a general rule, people don't suddenly start objecting to Christianity until they realize that they have to stand before God and answer for their sinful lifestyle. You see, if you don't tell them they have to answer for their sinful lifestyle, you can tell them anything they want to hear, and they'll be completely cool with it. So don't be afraid to use the word you. You will find that the results will be, I guess you could say, scintillating. But you can see the results being more real when you use you and not just we. Because people don't want to feel like they're going to be alone. But isn't that the truth? So we're going to look at the Bible here. I'd say it's a pretty good source of information. We're going to look at 2 Samuel chapter 12, verses 1 through 7. Then the Lord sent Nathan to David, and he came to him and said to him, There were 2 men in one city, one rich and the other poor. The man had exceedingly many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing, except one little ewe lamb which he had bought and nourished, and it grew up together with him and his children. It ate of his own food, and drank from his own cup, and lay in his bosom, and it was like a daughter to him. And a traveler came to the rich man, who refused to take from his own flock and from his own herd to prepare for the one wayfaring man who had come to him. But he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for the man who had come to him. So David's anger was greatly aroused against the man, and he said to Nathan, As the Lord lives, the man who has done this shall surely die, and he shall restore 4-fold for the lamb, because he did this thing and because he had no pity. Now listen carefully as to how Nathan responds to this in verse 7. Then Nathan said to David, You are that man. Pretty heavy stuff, right? Nathan the prophet, he had quite the backbone to be able to stand before the king. Because King David at the time had just committed adultery and murder. He lusted after Bathsheba, who was the wife of Uriah the Hittite. He slept with her, got her pregnant, tried to pin the pregnancy on Uriah by bringing him home from the army, and when he refused to lay with her, he just sent him out into the front line to make sure that he got killed. Just to cover everything up, so that way he could take the wife for himself. Pretty sick and twisted, huh? So Nathan started out with a completely harmless parable. That is why Nathan was able to get through this, and that is why David reacted in the way that he did. Because David was like, hey, this man's going to have to pay for what he did. How dare he do that? Not realizing the whole thing was about himself. Now, something really interesting happens. Now, Nathan goes in to deliver a message from the Lord, and it's just specific details regarding his sin. But we're just going to look at verse 13. So David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And you can look at Psalm 51, and that's when he wrote it, was after repenting of murdering Uriah the Hittite. It's very, very interesting. Now, had Nathan the prophet just simply said, oh, well, we are all those types of people. We all tend to steal poor man's lambs from time to time, don't we? David would not have torn his robes and said, I have sinned against the Lord. You see, David was justifying himself until Nathan confronted him. Nathan got David on his high horse and then pulled the rug out from under him. It was an incredibly effective way to confront the man with his sin. He made it very personal. You are that man. It's heavy and very gutsy. Now, what his actual tone was doesn't really matter. But he still said it. For you, the Christian, nowadays, we still have to be very bold and courageous and uncompromising in our preaching. You can still be loving and caring and tender, but you have to use you. We're going to look at another scriptural example of somebody who is repenting. And there's a good reason for this particular passage. We're going to look at Job chapter 40, verse 4. Behold, I am vile. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand over my mouth. In verse 5 it also says, Once I have spoken, but I will not answer. Yes, twice, but I will proceed no further. Now at this point, God appeared to Job out of the whirlwind and challenged him with 70 beautiful questions. And it must have been terrifying. I mean, to have somebody speaking to you through a tornado, yeah, that's got to be scary enough, but he knew it was God. Now, even though Job didn't actually sin, he was, in fact, justifying himself after a while. At first he would justify God, but as time went on, he began justifying himself. But when God answered him and confronted him, the only thing that Job could do is lay his hand over his mouth and shut up. You see, the point is, as long as the sinner is talking, they're not listening. And they generally won't start talking and objecting and questioning until they realize just how much is at stake. So next time you're faced with that sinner who starts getting hostile, making accusations against you, oh, you're judging me, you're making unfair accusations, or just kind of shrugging it off like, yeah, I don't believe in the Bible, or yeah, that's your opinion. The next time a sinner says things like that to you, remember, it's because you're saying you, and you are making it very personal to them, because it is personal. Friends, Christian friends, whatever you want to call yourselves, we have a responsibility to God ourselves, because Jesus commissioned us to preach the gospel. And the gospel can be a little painful and a little scary to that lost and angry sinner. So don't be afraid when they start lashing out with words, because you know that it's working. As I said, people these days are all about themselves, except when it comes to personal responsibility. So if you want to start out the conversation making it about them in a good way, well, maybe you'll hook them in a little better. But just remember, this needs to be personal. Personal to God. Don't worry, Christians, you can do it. It's possible. I can't say that it's easy, but it's possible. People are coming to Christ still. The Lord is not done working. It is the power of God unto salvation. So keep that in mind. Be of good courage. And just keep fighting. This is Willie Needham reminding you to fight until the bell rings. Thank you for listening to the Set the Captives Free Ministries weekly podcast. For more information on the ministry or about Willie Needham, give us a call at 855-507-0379 or saltoftheoats@gmail.com. To write to us or send a donation by mail, our address is P.O. Box 467, Modena, New York 12548. And let your conversation always be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. God bless.